In the spring of 1513, a Spanish explorer sailed for weeks across open ocean chasing a legend, a fountain of youth. The kind of story that makes men leave everything behind and sail toward the edge of the world. He never found the fountain, but he found something else. A coastline so thick with wildflowers, so impossibly green, that he gave it a name that would outlast every empire that ever tried to claim it. He called it La Florida, the land of flowers. But Florida would become one of the most contested prizes in the making of America. It would be invaded by an American general who crossed its borders without congressional authorization. Scarred by the costliest war the United States ever fought against a native nation. Admitted to the Union with slavery sealed permanently into its founding constitution. And the man who became the first Jewish senator in American history, the man who fought hardest to bring Florida into the Union, enslaved hundreds of people on a Gulf Coast plantation, and later helped tear apart the very Union he had spent his life building. This is how Florida was forged, and nothing about it is what you were taught. The explorer who named LA Florida was Juan Ponce de León. He had sailed north from Puerto Rico with 3 ships and roughly 200 men. By early April 1513, his expedition had reached the northeast coast of Florida. He named it from the Spanish Easter celebration called Pascua Florida, which translates roughly as Feast of Flowers, part religious devotion, part description. The land was thick with wildflowers, unlike anything he had seen in the Caribbean. Here is the first thing most people do not know. Ponce de León did not believe he had found a continent. He thought he was standing on a very large island. He sailed south along the coastline, through what are now the Florida Keys, mapping and cataloging, then returned to Puerto Rico. The Fountain of Youth? Historians have found no evidence he was actually searching for it. The romantic myth grew from writings published well after his death, not from his own accounts. He returned to Florida in 1521 to attempt a permanent settlement. The Calusa people, the indigenous nation who had lived in Florida for thousands of years, fought back with precision. During a skirmish near what is today Charlotte Harbor, Ponce de León was struck by an arrow. He was evacuated to Havana. He died there in July 1521. The man who named Florida never lived to see it become anything more than a name on a Spanish map. For the next 50 years, Spain tried repeatedly to plant a permanent settlement in Florida. Every attempt collapsed. Disease, climate, indigenous resistance. Then, in September 1565, a Spanish admiral named Pedro Menendez de Aviles founded a city on the northeast coast. He called it San Agustin, Saint Augustine, the oldest continuously inhabited European settlement in the continental United States, founded 55 years before the Pilgrims reached Plymouth Rock. Spain held Florida for nearly 2 centuries. Then, in 1763, after losing the 7 Years' War to Great Britain, Spain handed it over as part of the Treaty of Paris. Britain held it for 20 years. When the 13 American colonies declared independence in 1776, Florida did not join them. Florida's settlers conducted raids into Georgia on behalf of the Crown. Spain reclaimed Florida in 1783. It was still not American soil. By the early 1800s, Spanish Florida had become something that American plantation owners in Georgia and the Carolinas feared more than any foreign army. It had become a sanctuary. The Seminole people, a nation formed from various indigenous groups pushed south by American expansion, had developed deep ties with African men and women who had escaped slavery in the American South. These Black Seminoles lived in their own communities throughout the Florida interior. Spain did not routinely return escaped enslaved people to American owners. For Southern slaveholders, that was not a political inconvenience. That was an existential threat. In 1816, the United States Army, under General Andrew Jackson's broader command, destroyed a British-built garrison on the Apalachicola River, deep inside Spanish Florida. The garrison had been occupied by Black Seminoles and free Africans. The explosion and the assault that followed killed an estimated 270 people inside. This happened on Spanish soil. No war had been declared. No congressional authorization existed. What followed became known as the First Seminole War. From 1817 to 1818, Andrew Jackson marched an army of approximately 3,000 men across an international border into foreign territory. He burned Seminole villages. He seized Spanish military posts at St. Mark's and Pensacola. He put to death 2 British citizens he accused of inciting the conflict. Congress had not sanctioned it. President Monroe had not formally authorized it. Jackson did it anyway. Spain protested. Britain expressed outrage. And then nothing happened to Jackson. Because Spain could not defend Florida. They had too few troops, too little money, and no appetite for a war with a nation that had already shown it would simply march in. The message to Madrid was clear. You cannot hold this territory. By 1819, Spain and the United States were at the negotiating table. Secretary of State John Quincy Adams handled the diplomacy. On February 22, 1819, Adams and Spanish Minister Luis de Onís signed what became known as the Adams-Onís Treaty. Here is what it actually said. Spain ceded all of Florida to the United States. In exchange, the United States assumed up to $5 million in legal claims that American citizens held against Spain. The United States did not hand Spain $5 million in cash. It absorbed debts already owed to its own citizens. Spain received no monetary payment. They gave Florida away to make the problem stop. Adams wrote in his diary that day that it was perhaps the most important day of his life. The formal transfer of Florida to the United States happened on July 17, 1821. The man appointed to govern the territory as it passed from Spanish to American hands was Andrew Jackson, the same general who had invaded it. Florida became an official United States territory on March 30, 1822. The capital was placed at Tallahassee, a former Seminole settlement roughly halfway between Pensacola and St. Augustine. It is still Florida's capital today. With Florida under American control, the pressure on the Seminole people became relentless. President Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act in 1830. Every indigenous nation east of the Mississippi was to be relocated west. The Seminoles refused. On December 28, 1835, near what is now Bushnell, Florida, Seminole warriors ambushed a United States Army column led by Major Francis Dade. Of 108 soldiers in that column, only 3 survived. On the same day, a Seminole leader named Osceola led a separate attack that put to death the United States Indian Removal Agent. 2 coordinated strikes. One day. The Second Seminole War had begun. The United States sent more than 30,000 troops into Florida over the next 7 years. Fewer than 3,000 Seminole warriors stood against them. The Seminoles used the Everglades and the subtropical wilderness as their greatest weapon. Hit-and-run tactics that exhausted 4 American generals and frustrated every strategy the military attempted. The war lasted until 1842. It cost more than $20 million in 19th century money and more than 1,500 United States soldiers' lives. It became the costliest war the country ever fought against a Native American nation. Osceola was captured in 1837, not in battle, under a flag of truce. American officers invited him to negotiations and then arrested him on the spot. He died in prison on January 30th, 1838, at approximately 34 years old. No peace treaty was ever signed. A small band of Seminoles under a leader named Sam Jones never surrendered, never signed, and never left. The Seminole tribe of Florida still describes itself today as the only tribe in America that never signed a peace treaty with the United States. They were never conquered, they were simply outlasted. Even as the Second Seminole War raged, Florida's settlers were pushing hard for statehood. In December 1838, Florida held a constitutional convention in the Gulf Coast city of St. Joseph. That city no longer exists. Yellow fever and back-to-back hurricanes destroyed it in the years that followed. But the Constitution they wrote in that doomed city survived. And it contained a provision that tells you everything about what Florida was being built to protect. The legislature was explicitly prohibited from passing any law for the emancipation of enslaved people. Slavery was not merely permitted in Florida's founding document, it was constitutionally sealed shut. The man who pushed hardest to get Florida over the finish line in Congress was named David Levy. Born in 1810 on the island of St. Thomas in the Danish West Indies, his father was a Sephardic Jewish merchant of Moroccan ancestry who had acquired vast tracts of land in Florida during the final years of Spanish rule. David came to Florida as a child. He studied law. He entered territorial politics. By 1841, he was Florida's delegate to Congress with one consuming mission: get Florida into the Union. He made the journey between Florida and Washington 11 times over the next 4 years, by horseback, by riverboat. He argued, negotiated, drafted constitutional language, and wore down opponents in both chambers. On March 3, 1845, President John Tyler signed the Admission Act. Florida entered the Union as the 27th state of the United States of America. David Levy was elected one of Florida's first 2 United States senators. When he took his seat on July 1, 1845, he became the first person of Jewish heritage ever to serve in the United States Senate. He had taken his mother's Sephardic family name, David Levy Yulee. He also enslaved hundreds of people on a 5,000-acre plantation at Homosassa on Florida's Gulf Coast. He used enslaved labor to construct Florida's first cross-state railroad. And when the Civil War came, he resigned from the United States Senate and joined the Confederate Congress, fighting to dismantle the Union he had devoted his life to joining. The man who forged Florida helped break America 16 years later. Ponce de León named this land the Land of Flowers. He thought he was describing what he saw. He may not have known he was describing what it would have to survive 332 years of competing empires, an illegal invasion dressed up as a military campaign. A people who were never defeated and never left. A founding constitution designed to make slavery permanent. And a senator who made history twice, once by entering the room and once by burning it down. Florida was not simply discovered. It was taken, it was traded, it was fought over on terms that were never honest and never equal. The flowers are still there. So is everything else. Florida's story was shaped by empire, war, and negotiation. But the next chapter changes the entire map of America. In the next Forged States episode, we head to Louisiana, where Napoleon's ambitions, a slave revolt in Haiti, and one of the greatest land deals in world history collide to reshape the future of the United States. Up next, Louisiana, the purchase that doubled a nation.